Hey everyone, thank you for joining the DLC Drop podcast today. My guest is Rebecca Longawa. She's a good friend, founder of Happy Warrior, and she has a ton of experience in both traditional sports and esports. Today she's going to share with us how there's similarities and differences between the two spaces and talk quite a bit about how traditional sports athletes are now interacting in this space. Let's talk to Rebecca. Drop in the untold stories of industry leaders, influencers, and insights on future innovation. I'm John Davidson, and this is the DLC Drop Podcast. Rebecca Longawa, founder of Happy Warrior, thank you so much for joining me on the DLC Drop Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. We've had so many one-on-one conversations over the years, and when we were talking the other day and decided to do the podcast, I was thinking it's just going to be so much fun because we have these conversations all the time. They're just not recorded unless you're recording them and I don't know about it, which would be terrifying. But I'm glad to have you here and share you with my audience.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on, and I'm glad to be here. And we have had about 1 million conversations over the past 3 years. So
we have, and we're involved with a lot of the same things. Both, I think we met through Stadia Ventures, which is a wonderful startup accelerator focused on sports and esports, based in St. Louis. Also comes down to Frisco, Texas, from time to time, and we help brands out there. We advise and are involved with a few other brands as well. And so it's always wonderful talking with you because not only are you a good friend, but I learn a lot from you every single time.
And I learn a lot from you. Truly.
Well, I appreciate it. I'd love to share a little bit about your background. So, way back when, not too long ago, because you're not that old, of course, 29, folks, 29. You were with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you were managing the brand over there. Why don't you take us through T-Wolves to esports, and let's talk a little bit about it in between.
Yeah, so my relationship with the Timberwolves actually goes way back to 2003, which now I just gave away that I can't be 29. So my relationship with the Timberwolves went all the way back to 2003 when I was working at a digital advertising agency, and the Timberwolves were my client. So it was many, many moons ago, and I stayed very closely connected with their chief marketing officer, Ted Johnson, for a number of years. And Ted and I are still very close and work on a number of initiatives together to this day. But as time had gone on with me kind of freelancing for the Wolves on a number of initiatives, there kind of came a point, it was 2011, where there were some like life changes in my life. My dad had just passed away. My son was starting preschool, and I was kind of ready to kind of lean in even more. And I saw a lot of opportunity with that organization. So I approached Ted and John O'Connell, who was their VP of marketing at the time, to create a role for me. So it wasn't an existing job opening. It was kind of a catered role, as the org was always evolving, to have someone, which was myself, to kind of manage the overall brand integrity. So I was kind of like a hyper project manager, and I got to work on some really exciting things while I was there. The remodel of our offices, some emerging technology that was coming into play with a lot of sports technology was really rearing its head at that time. So going from paper tickets to flash seats, ticketing app, bringing in a CRM, to keep everybody aligned. And we were also working with a digital marketing firm on kind of taking our PowerPoint traditional presentations and really creating like a hyper digital experience with that. So it was really fun. That was kind of my foray into sports tech. And, fast forward a few years, I'd left the Wolves, was working on a couple different projects, and got to know the guys over at Sports Engine. Mm-hmm. And Carson Kipfer, who was one of the co-founders of Sports Engine, introduced me to Stadia. And Stadia Ventures, it's just kind of like this little step from like this traditional sports and sports tech now into really focused on being an advisor and mentor in sports technology. And Stadia went through a shift. And as you recall, we were getting applicants for esports technology companies applying to be involved in the cohort. And I remember we had this pitch, and the team left the room, that the startup left the room, and we were all kind of chatting about who knows about esports. And then it just kind of evolved from there, where we started intentionally bringing in additional subject matter experts on esports into Stadia Ventures, and actually doing more call outs and call to action for esports tech companies to apply to our cohorts, really intentional and deliberate. And that's where, I'd already known about esports. I had been studying it for a while. A close friend of mine is a huge Overwatch player. We brainstormed how to help Overwatch players build their personal brands, because I had done that with pro athletes in the past. And so I'd already been doing a ton of research in the space. And it just, everything with my career naturally had evolved. So I'd been involved in marketing, branding, sports marketing, sports technology. Now this esports thing is rearing its head, and really I saw a ton of opportunity, and I love leaning into opportunity and innovation.
Yeah.
So it literally happened organically, where I was doing my 9 to 5 in traditional advertising, but doing a ton of research, having a lot of conversations about esports. And that I've been really blessed to be able to be a strategist and a consultant and help brands build out, within that esports marketplace. It's taken a while to actually be able to monetize that passion.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's been a very non-traditional, not planned out journey. It's just being open and, I think, willing to lean in on innovation.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot, of just, pursuing opportunities, seeing something that is promising, and taking the leap, taking those sometimes scary steps to go where you're not sure it'll lead, but you see that it's going to lead somewhere you want to go. I think what's something that's super interesting about you, there's a lot of people who are coming from the traditional sports space and they're coming to the esports space, but they don't understand the community. And there's this gap, both people at agencies who have experience with just traditional marketing, or people from traditional sports who have experience like you did, kind of building a brand, but they don't understand how this community is different, how they demand more of brands, how a logo, somewhere in the venue isn't going to do what it does with older
Mhm.
generations. And I think a big part of that with you is you're very empathetic. You're a community first person, and so you're one of those people that, even though you weren't born and bred in this space, you've really humbly gone to the community, and you had friends in it already, of course, but gone to the community and just sought to learn and see where you can add value, and you found ways to really add tremendous value. I've seen it in person. Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the differences that you've seen in, a variety of ways, from traditional sports and esports industries and communities?
Yeah. Well, I must say, the first time that I really was aware that there was, that people, like, I don't know even how to describe it, idolatry or like hyper fandom. I
Yeah.
think I was in 5th grade, and I was like at a birthday party, and New Kids on the Block were like the biggest thing. They're like a boy band. They're like an 80s, 90s boy band, right?
Right.
For the listeners that don't know, that are too cool to know who New Kids on the Block are. But I remember this girl who had her birthday party had a VHS tape, and it was like a New Kids on the Block like concert and behind the scenes type thing, and these other girls were going nuts, and I was just like, I didn't really understand it. Like, why are they so excited? And then she
Huh.
got a sleeping bag and pillowcase, and she was like crying about it. It was so weird. I That was like the first time where I'm like, holy crap! Like, someone's that passionate about something. It like never really clicked with me, and I don't. It's always
Mm.
been that, like that for me. I think one of the reasons why I've been really successful working really hands on with pro athletes is that I don't really care. I don't know. I mean, I care about them. I care about them as people, and I can really see ways to help them monetize and like grow their brands and lean into that. But I've always been fascinated with the mindset of like this hyper fan, this like super
Mm.
enthusiastic. like fandom has just, since I was in 5th grade, just completely overwhelmed me. And I just wanted to kind of understand and dig in, like what makes that, what triggers that in people where they're just like so passionate. Working in pro sports, it's all about connecting with fans. And a lot of the ways that you connect with fans in traditional sports is in the arena, is in the moment, is on game day. And
Right.
the most passion that I saw was actually with our WNBA team, the Minnesota Lynx. And I think the reason why is those athletes have made themselves over the years so accessible to fans. And they created this bond where they had the most passionate season ticket holders I've ever seen. I mean, just large numbers of very passionate season ticket holder fans. And the amount of young basketball players, both, youth basketball players, both boys and girls, really being integrated into game day, being integrated with halftime shows, or when the Minnesota Lynx would win, all the little kids could run onto the court and the players would stand out there with them and they would play this same song and they'd all dance with them. They danced together. It was just a really beautiful, heartfelt, amazing moment.
Yeah.
And that's the closest thing that I think we get to in understanding why esports fans and fans of streamers as well really are hyper passionate about the talent that they watch on stream, is because they have this instant connectivity, this real live tangible connectivity with that streamer, with that personality, because the barriers are less. So from a community standpoint, I mean, that's what really, really stands out to me. And in regards to the other aspects of being in a front office for a pro team, the brand integration and the way that brands really lean in and get into esports versus traditional sports is similar to what you said, right? The difference is in traditional sports, it's a lighter lift, I will say. Traditional sports fans, they are just kind of go with the flow, whatever you're going to kind of throw at me. I'm here, I'm having fun. It is easy, I think, for a brand to hand out and sample products. That's a big part in traditional sports, is product sampling, getting people familiarized with your brand, with your product in the arena, and billboard and a lot of these traditional spaces. In esports, it's so heavily digital that you need to be a little bit more nuanced. And the main difference from a brand perspective is a brand can market to traditional sports, but in esports, a brand needs to be a part of the community in order for the esports fans to really believe in them. They don't want to be marketed to. They want to be part of that conversation, about the brand conversation. And they want to know that brand is there kind of for the right reasons. An example would be the difference between, I'll just pick on insurance, right? An insurance company coming into esports and just creating a campaign around just brand awareness, like, this is why we exist, and this is our story, and these are the types of people that we serve, and these are the life moments that happen in which it's critical that you make different decisions. I know, you, John, being, a relatively young guy buying a home recently, that's a trigger standpoint, and that's a story that can be told.
Sure.
But then, that's probably the right approach, because you're talking to the community in a way that they can resonate with, that they understand through storytelling, and that's very authentic. The way that I think an insurance company could come in and do it wrong is talking to the community and expecting something immediately in return. So going in with a campaign that says, click on this and fill out this thing for a quote. And then, the marketing minds behind that type of a brand are, checking the boxes and seeing how many people are filling it out to measure success. That's not where success is found in this space. You're not going to get a hyper digital audience who was born digital, right? The majority of esports fans have been digital their whole lives, to think that there's value for them in that. They're like, oh, I get it. They want me to fill this thing out, and they want my data, and they want my email address. And now I'm going to get all this outreach that is going to annoy me. They see right through that marketing tactic. They're way too hyper sophisticated and smart for that. They would much rather see that a brand is in their space, hear stories about how that brand is impacting lives over time. And when they're ready, like buying a first time home buyer, second time home buyer, that's when they're going to remember that brand and say, you know, that brand wasn't annoying. They weren't bugging me. They weren't asking me to do a bunch of things for their own metrics. They were just there for us. And they were talking to our community about and talking with us about things that matter to us and sharing stories about people just like me and how they helped them. I bet they'll help me too. And that's really the key difference that is happening between the way a traditional space would go. I mean, if you were at a Timberwolves game and there was somebody wanting to gather information, I mean, it would be like, here's a piece of paper, you fill out the form and you drop it in this bucket and you might win this signed basketball. It's just way more nuanced here. It's much different.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is that sports have always been sponsored. And so with traditional sports, we're used to seeing it happen. People expect it. I always use the analogy of Cowboy Stadium. Albertsons, the grocery store, is a sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. And when I've gone to games, they have this mini blimp that's flying around inside of the dome. And it's super cool for football fans. It's like, oh, cool. Albertsons, a little blimp. That's fun. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll go shopping there one time. And if they had the same sentiment as the esports community, they'd say, what the heck is Albertsons doing here? They don't have anything to do with football. What right do you have?
Right.
And I think a big part of it is also esports was hated on for a long time. Gamers were hated on for a long time. And so young people see these brands coming in now that they see, oh, I can get something out of you. There's a lot of you. Oh, you have disposable income. And it's like, bro, where were you before? Yeah. I mean, it's that whole thing, like somebody who maybe bullied you in high school and then you're popular and beautiful and rich. And they're like hitting you up. Hey, you want to hang out? You want to come to this networking event? It's like, no, I don't.
Right.
And that's a really similar sentiment. One thing that I've been hearing from a lot of people I've been interviewing on the podcast is it's all about additive experience, being additive to the community. How can you make things better? How can you enhance experiences? And I think something that a lot of brands miss essentially is simply talking to the community and saying, what do you need? There's these brands are so focused on the KPIs they have, the initiatives they want to push, and what their priorities are, that they go to the community with those things in mind, and they never once go to the community and say, hey guys, what do you need? What's cool? What sucks? What's a pain point? What should be different? What do you want more of? And even whether you're an endemic brand, you can be additive directly to the game. But if you're a non-endemic, you can be additive in ways that are organic to the lifestyles of gamers that maybe aren't even, closely tied with the act of gaming itself.
Right. Well, we see that on the tech side. I mean, I know you've seen it as well in the sports tech and side, especially, is there's like the continuation of the same idea. I literally have heard like this same exact idea pitched to me for the last 15 years in traditional sports. And we've seen similar things even come through Stadia, and definitely a lot of applications come through Stadia, of like an app that delivers your food or your swag to your seat. And it doesn't exist, but sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, why doesn't it exist? Nobody's asking for it. Nobody's sitting in their seat wanting hot dog and going, I wish somebody would just bring me a hot dog. No one is doing that. But you like to get up, you like to stretch your legs. You're going to go to the bathroom, you're going to pick up a hot dog on your way back. Like, we don't, It's just, yeah, it's a cool idea and nobody's doing it, but you have to listen to the audience and say, is there a demand for this
Mm-hmm.
before you really lean in and try to do a new thing. And I think that's a good lesson for brands as well to say, you know, look at your entire product portfolio. Is there something that does resonate with this audience? And what is a really thoughtful way that you can, get this product in front of them without being, um, I like the idea of like drop your traditional metric stuff, just set it aside.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to support this community? Do you want to be a part of the community? Okay, then you don't need to track how many people use your $2 coupon off of your whatever that you're trying to sell them. Give them a coupon for sure, but your success should not be measured in the old traditional ways. You have to evolve your thinking. As a marketer, you just really need to evolve your thinking to think this is like getting into football 100 and some years ago as a sponsor,
Yeah.
right? Like you're literally having the ability to get on what is truly kind of still the ground floor and build a really strong brand presence at a time in which this community with the Gen Z especially, demographic within this community, where they're making brand decisions that they will keep through their lifetime.
Mm.
Like I grew up, there was always Budweiser beer and Pepsi, and then it turned to Diet Pepsi and like Bud Light in my fridge when I was a little kid with what my parents liked to drink.
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point in my life where I made my own decisions, and I was probably high school, I think, when I decided because of McDonald's Coke, and I know that everyone listening is like, yeah, yep, that like I was going to be a Coke person. I was going to be drinking Coca-Cola. It just like McDonald's Coke was huge for me. I don't drink soda anymore, but I made that decision and it stuck with me. If I was going to have a soda, if I was going to have something, I would want it to be a Coca-Cola, because that I made that decision at a very formative age and it has stuck with me. And like a boy, I like to drink Coors Light. And so I always drank Coors Light because sometimes when you're an impressionable, young, beautiful girl, you just like the things that the boy you like, so that he thinks you like the same things as him. It's what we do.
It's a great marketing tactic.
Isn't it?
It is. Was there, with Coke, I'm curious, was there a specific moment you remember that like turned your brand loyalty to them, or was it something just over time that kind of resulted?
Well, McDonald's Coca-Cola is so amazing for many reasons. Their crushed ice, the size of the straw flow for Coca-Cola straws is just, or for McDonald's straws is just like nothing else. And I remember when we would go to Taco Bell, they had these skinny, and I don't know if they do anymore, these crappy skinny straws. So we would literally grab handfuls of straws at McDonald's and like put them in the glove compartment so that anywhere else, if they had crappy straws, we'd like get the right flow. It's weird, but it's a real true thing. But then it was like, I loved that. I loved McDonald's Coke so much that when we'd go to the store, I wanted to buy the Coke. Like I became loyal to Coca-Cola. But I also think that, and I know for a fact based on their marketing tactics, the brand of Coca-Cola just evokes happiness and community, share a Coke and a smile, open happiness. Like the mantra
Polar
of
bears.
what that brand,
Polar bears.
Yeah, polar bears. Oh, like the mantra of that brand is something that I feel like resonates with how I live my life, like who I am, right? Whereas Pepsi's always been like this choice of a new generation. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like it didn't resonate with me at all. Like, am I the new generation? Is that me? Is it all the people in the commercial don't look like me? Like, well, I don't understand. I never really felt like I had a connection with the Pepsi brand.
Well, Coca-Cola is one of the great brand marketing stories because they have the global market share. They're the leader there, but in every taste test, Pepsi does better. And so the lesson there is that brand marketing can really make a difference. Now, I prefer Coke over Pepsi just because I like the taste better. I'm not a huge soda person, but I've always loved that story ever since marketing school. Esports is very much a brand marketing play. And you talked a little bit about people need to shift their metrics. Do you have some metrics in mind that you can share with the audience that should be measured that are a little different than the traditional?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for is conversation.
Hmm.
Is a brand getting into the space in a way that it's gaining conversation in the sub layers? Are people talking about it on Reddit? That to me is a metric to kind of pay attention to. And then, when it comes to brands creating moments in, say, a tournament or in stream, I really think paying attention to the conversation that's being had in those chats is probably one of the most powerful things.
Hmm.
So, it's more nuanced is what I'm looking for. And I'm not I'm like, I've been working in marketing my whole life, but I'm like not a traditional marketer.
Sure.
So I definitely go more with what evokes emotion and what is coming across that feels really authentic.
Yeah.
Those unexpected moments. I mean, you shared with me probably one of the best, and I don't know if you still think it's one of the best brand integration, brand moments ever, which is DHL.
Yeah.
And I still think that DHL, from case studies and things that I've read, I still think that DHL is the best case of a brand coming in and doing something right by really truly integrating their brand into the esports mindset and community, both from in-game, so traditional gaming,
Yep.
then into live events through the actual competition in esports. And I think what has happened with them is it ended up anchoring back to being successful for them in terms of impressions and brand growth.
Yeah.
But I would really love to know from like their CMO, like what was their intention a metrics play? I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but I
Sure.
think that the way that they went about executing it was definitely top notch because it just felt completely credible.
Yeah, I think they probably went more in depth with their strategy than most any other non-endemic company I've seen. I use the Turtle Wax Optic Gaming example a lot of times. That was pretty in depth, but if memory serves, what DHL did, they did a number of things. They did some in-game content where I'm trying to think. I think it's Dota 2. Were they sponsored?
Yep.
Yeah, Dota 2. So there's a character in there that has to do with transportation, and so they were doing content with DHL being integrated into the game in a way that their service ties in to the
Yeah.
character.
It was like it was basically an in-game character that was like a DHL cart that was delivering
Yeah.
necessary items in game to somebody who needed it, right?
Yep.
Like this important box of, I don't know what, gear of some sort, right?
Yeah, and that was one part of it, and then they did a lot of in-arena content with a well-known influencer and, integrated into streams and stuff. They're
Mhm.
also they had a mobile game, which was another piece of it, and then they were the logistics partner for Dota 2, literally shipping the production equipment for tournaments around the world. And
Mhm.
so it's super cool to see how, okay, there's in-game, there's influencer, there's mobile, and
Right.
there's the actual act of shipping it with your organic service. And what results from that, number one, you have Dota fans in arenas who are they're chanting DHL, which people in the esports industry know that this is a legendary thing, legendary experience. The other thing is when somebody's shipping a package who's an esports fan and they know how this company has supported the community, they're absolutely choosing DHL over FedEx or
Mhm.
UPS.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think
so,
like one of the more recent stats I read, I think it was 71% of esports fans will intentionally choose a brand that sponsors esports, that is a brand partner, is a brand sponsor. That's a huge
right,
number. That's a huge number. And
right.
it just becomes sticky to them. It becomes sticky because they are engaging sometimes 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day with a product, which is the gaming industry as a whole, right?
Yep.
And the brands that are continually showing up there are the ones that they're going to be loyal to. But
Right.
if you can be seen, that to be seen in that space is powerful. But if you're pushy, that's where you get rejected. Or if you make, I think we've talked about the Aldi example in the past about if you make a broad assumption, a negative assumption about the industry as a whole, about the negative effects of gaming as, where you're misrepresenting what gaming stands for, like Aldi did, then there's backlash.
What did
right?
Aldi do? I'm trying to remember.
So Aldi did a campaign, and I don't think it was stateside. I believe it was in the UK.
Okay.
The Aldi did a campaign saying, parents, get your kids to the dinner table. We'll kill them out of the game they're playing with this pro gamer. And it was like, I
remember this now. Yeah.
The blowback was so raw. It was like people saying, like, that's the same as saying, spend your Saturday with your kids. Why are you with your kids at their pee-wee soccer tournament when you could be home sitting around a table with your family on this Saturday? We're going to have David Beckham destroy your kid on the soccer field. You should go home, right? It's like, well, how about instead of killing your kid out of a video game, you like sit down and play a video game with your kid. I mean, you
100%.
join them. How about you sit next to them and ask them about what they're doing, have them explain Apex Legends to you, and how it works. So, it was just such a horrible assumption that because somebody's kid plays video games that they don't value having dinner with their parents. I have every meal. I have every meal with Roman, who's 14. In the morning, it's hash browns. It's been hash browns, sausage links, and eggs for us recently, and I make breakfast and we sit down together. We both eat like we're vacuum cleaners. We both just like literally just kind of like eating our breakfast together, but we do that every morning together. And I value that time. And I made like a homemade tortilla soup today. And Sydney and Roman and I, and actually Danielle, my brother's girlfriend, is here cleaning house today. Thank you. So we all sat down and shared that lunch together. And I know that my son is a gamer. My son is the target audience. I'm very blessed to have a walking case study in my house. I have you can literally do a focus group in my house with Roman and all of his little buddies and through Discord. But of course he wants to sit and have lunch with me. Of course he wants to sit and have dinner with me. He's very well balanced. He's also, as you know, a skateboarder, and he skates almost every single day. If it's nice enough outside, I mean, they shoveled last week. They shoveled off, it was pretty warm, the remaining snow, and swept all the snow and water off so that they could go on this half pipe in town. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, these are balanced people. These are balanced gamers. Are the stats we have on them is it shouldn't shock marketers because they should be paying attention to what's happening with Gen Z. They always say, how do we reach Gen Z? We want to reach Gen Z. And like I'd say for the last 3 years, I've been raising my hand saying, this is a really valid space you should take a look at. And they're like, well, not there. We want to reach them, but scary. Gaming? I don't think so. It's like, literally you're saying you want to reach this audience. This is where the majority of them are spending hours a day. And you're afraid. You're afraid. Like, take a risk. Be a disruptor. Like, lean in. I don't know.
Yeah, I think too,
Not
Gen
ranting.
Z, like members of Gen Z are complex, like just like what you said with your son, like just because you're a gamer doesn't mean that's all you do is game. And, also the space is maturing, and so you're seeing the cool thing I think now about the gaming and esports community is everybody's a gamer. Used to be that, just the gamers were the kids who were, left out of recess or left out of getting picked for football or whatever. Now the gamers are playing in the Super Bowl. You see so many traditional athletes who are also gamers. Juju Smith-Schuster is a great example.
Yep.
De'Aaron Fox in the NBA. I think those guys are two who have leveraged it and positioned themselves so well that they, gamers see them as gamers who also play basketball or also
Yeah.
play football. Talk a little bit about your experience with professional athletes and what you're seeing with them moving into the gaming space to promote themselves, to build their personal brands.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've noticed over many years of working in pro sports is athletes are also gamers. When I was at the Timberwolves, we had a Make-A-Wish foundation request, and it was a young kid who his wish through Make-A-Wish was to play video games with Karl Anthony Towns. And what they did was created an in-arena experience where they lowered the center hung so it was even with the suite level.
Yeah.
And this child and his family were in there with Karl Anthony Towns, and they sat next to each other and they played video games on the big screen. Like what a moment, right?
Yeah. What an
And
experience.
I think that would have been like, I don't know, 20, anywhere between 2014 and like 2017. I don't even remember what year it was.
Okay.
A really cool activation. But athletes are gamers, and many of them are quite young. So they've probably been gaming their whole lives. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm 42 and we had a Nintendo. We had an Atari 2600 and then we had a Nintendo. Like I played games growing up. Athletes are already gamers. What we're seeing is a shift of the ability for monetization, especially with Twitch. There has been a lot of athlete integration into live events. I mean, even 3 years ago with the Player Up tournament that was an amateur tournament done here at one of our casinos, we had pro athletes coming in and really being a part of event activation where you could play Madden with some of the Vikings players, for example,
Yeah.
or FIFA with some of our pro soccer players. And we've got a really strong, in the Twin Cities, we have a really strong community in esports here across the board with almost all of our major pro teams leaning in esports and gaming. So when you see that franchise adoption into the esports space and really encouragement that it allows players to be more open to becoming multifaceted in that way. So we had, and I know he left. I can't remember if he went to the Mets or not. I think that might be where he went. But Trevor May is a huge name in Minnesota sports. He played for the Minnesota Twins, and he has a great following on Twitch. And he does a lot, ongoing. He's very active. It's not a passive thing. It's a very active, intentional thing.
Yeah.
And he's built a really great brand, in esports. And I'm noticing, I mean, I speak on Clubhouse a little bit. And I was speaking on Clubhouse maybe it was last, not this past Monday, but 2 weeks ago. And somebody followed me that I wasn't super familiar with. And then they followed me, they followed me on Clubhouse and then quickly followed me on Instagram and then followed me on my Twitter because you can do all that on Clubhouse. I was like, who is this person? And it is Ryan Sheriff, who is a pitcher for the Tampa Bay Rays.
Cool.
And so now that I'm connected with him on Clubhouse, I mean, he's a gamer. He's really into esports, but he's also a pro athlete, baseball player, and he's a vegan. And the room that I was talking in was on esports, health and wellness and esports. And I mean, the amount of notifications that I get on my phone in Clubhouse that Ryan Sheriff is speaking in a room or joining a room and I should join this same room is like astounding to me. It's multiple times a day. So it is, I think that there's a movement happening where it's not just about one activity, one activation where, in the past, there's been things where an athlete is booked and paid to go to a live esports event. I think with the onset of COVID, more and more athletes are wanting to just get involved. We did the Gen Youth Million Meals Challenge, which was a Madden and NFL eSport EA Madden event. It was a beautifully done event. We had huge brand sponsors. Campbell's Chunky, Campbell's Chunky is a great case study of a brand that's doing everything right in esports. And they really have created a great balance between their campaigns in traditional sports and football specifically, and how that translates into the esports space.
What are they doing specifically?
Well, they've been doing a ton of Madden tournaments, and they're bringing in this, they've got this great narrative of the mother and son, Saquon Barkley and his mom, for this Million Meals Challenge. They came together and they were really sharing a lot of insight as to why it's important. Food nutrition for children is so important. And there's just like a natural love bond that really was able to shine through with the two of them, and a natural conversation. So Campbell's Chunky is doing a lot in regards to tournaments. Where they're literally creating content, almost like these little commercials that are really relevant to this space, and not just repurposing one thing to the next. It's been really kind of cool to see them come. They did a custom trophy for the winners of the Million Meals Challenge that was like a big Chunky's trophy. I wanted it to be a bowl you could put soup in at the top, but it was kind of like a can of soup.
That's called the Stanley Cup. That's already taken.
You don't drink soup out of the Stanley Cup.
A lot of things have been done with the Stanley Cup that I'm not sure if I want to touch it.
Oh.
Moving on.
Anyways, I just thought people drank beer out of it. I guess I didn't think about it. There could be any other thing to do in there, but
cereal.
I'll leave that to other people's imagination.
I was going with cereal.
Anyways, now I lost my train of thought.
Campbell's
Gen Youth and this Million Meals Challenge. Yeah, I mean, huge brands were coming in, but we were able to get 8 pro NFL players to be involved in this for no compensation. They wanted to be involved. For multiple reasons, obviously, because it's an NFL event. NFL was backing this event. It was an NFL sanctioned type of an event. It was for Gen Youth, which is feeding children all over the United States, when that need has really grown since COVID. But also, they want to be a part of an esports activation. They want to be a part of that story. They know that it's powerful to be involved in that. And that's been a big difference. Is it's not just about the traditional athlete mindset has been, I'll go do this thing for an hour, but it's going to cost you, $10,000. And then I'll show up and I'll do the thing. And a lot of times, like in my old days at Timberwolves, sometimes we'd come to an event, I'd be maybe shooting it, photography, and the players would arrive and they had no context of why they were even there. Like, they had no idea what they were doing there, what it was about. Nobody had really explained, because they just kind of get like shopped around from place to place and brought from one thing to the next. And sometimes, if it's not a team specific thing, if they're getting booked on something, they show up, they take pictures with people, they get a check. This is something that has to be very intentional, just like managing your own social media. Yes, a lot of times a pro athlete gets paid to do a branded tweet, but that doesn't mean the only time they do a single tweet is if somebody's going to pay them. That is what's happening in our space. You have to really think about it with that mindset. So, can you make money streaming? Can you make money at these events? Yes, you can, but you have to invest. Just like you have to post on social media, you have to be transparent and make some connections with the community in a social media platform. You don't get paid every single time you go on Instagram Live. You're building your brand presence on Instagram. And athletes understand that. They understand that from a social media standpoint, but they didn't immediately. It did take them a while, right? To understand how they can build their brand in social, so that a brand wants to pay them for a post. But if all they did was push products and only would send out a tweet if somebody paid them $10,000 to send a tweet out and talk about that product, nobody would follow them.
Exactly.
Right? So if you want to make money in esports, you want to make money streaming, you have to stream. You can't wait for somebody to pay you to do it. You have to invest. You have to
build an
learn.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah, build your audience, build your brand in that space, and then find a brand partner that resonates with who you are, what you believe in. Maybe it's something that you're already using or talking about, or sharing, or eating a certain snack all the time. That brand might pay attention, or you can even reach out to that brand and say, yo, I love to eat your Wallaby licorice when I'm gaming, and people are noticing, like, hey, like, let's talk about putting a link to buy right on my stream, right? Like,
yeah,
that's I think where they win. But I think there's risk associated with getting into that space as well. You're not able to edit like you do
you're talking about live streaming, right?
yeah, with your live streaming. I mean, you're on, so you're unfiltered.
Yeah.
You can't pause it like we do your podcast when I have a coughing attack. You have to just keep going.
Which didn't happen.
Never would have happened for me.
No, we're broadcast professionals.
I'm a pro. But there's been chatter in the news about athletes who have said things and have had major negative ramifications for things that they've said on stream, and you're held at a different standard.
Yeah.
Than a traditional streamer.
It's really interesting too, because, traditional sports is very filtered. It's very edited. And there's always the thing, like, you got to say the right thing, right? We don't hear traditional athletes cuss very much, but if you go on Twitch and you listen to pro gamers or pro streamers, I mean, the content is very different. It's less filtered. One of the things that I actually love most about esports is the trash talk, and the fact that, like, I remember years and years ago, Peyton Manning was playing. He lost some playoff game, and he just didn't have an offensive line that game. It was just like he was getting killed. And in his post-game conference, he kind of halfway hinted that he could have used a little more time in the pocket. And the media crushes him. Oh, he's not a leader. He blah, 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 blah. And that's what gets me kind of bummed on traditional sports, is like, you're not getting real interviews. You're not getting real feedback. You're getting guys who know how to read the script. And in esports, what's cool, and I hope we don't lose it, we'll see as the space matures over time and more people come in, and then it's got to be brand safe. You'll see, you go to a tournament and you see these pros just talking trash face to face to each other, and like, you choked. And man, I love that. I love talking a little trash myself. But to your point, you have these traditional athletes who you're used to hearing only saying the right thing, being very scripted, very filtered. And then they come over to Twitch, and then they're talking like people do talk on Twitch a lot of times. Now, sometimes that can go over the line, but with the type of language people are using, it's pretty common. And the brands that might sponsor this guy, right? Or the brands that might sponsor the team, where this guy is the face of that team, and this stuff starts happening, they're like, we're out. And it's probably blindsiding the players a lot. It's a whole new kind of media training sort of situation, I would guess.
Yeah, and we're like, how can you come across authentic?
Yep.
To the space, without, when there isn't a formal oversight from traditional teams. That's the real interesting thing.
Yeah.
Players have autonomy and the ability to not only monetize, but have a brand presence in gaming and in esports.
Yeah.
But you have to still understand that you are a brand. So you have to be very intentional into how you're going to present yourself. And there's a lot of soul searching, I think, that you need to do when you're going to be just talking free form for 6 hours or 4 hours or whatever, nonstop.
Yeah.
What type of a household were you raised in? What type of vernacular did you hear growing up? And we're in a very mature society now, where, when I was growing up, there were things, I would hear at the American Legion that are extremely offensive, right?
Okay.
Growing up in a little dirty little town with one stoplight, that I didn't even know what any of that stuff meant. And you hear it like all the time. I mean, I was watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure last night,
Okay.
and there was like a moment where like they're like, "What number am I thinking of?" Right? And then they're like, 69, dude. And I told Roman, I was like, Roman, I was 12 when that movie like came out, and I didn't know for years and years and years what that meant. And I literally had no frame of reference at all. And it is something that I could have easily said without knowing that it is kind of like a, potty talk. I didn't know that it was. I
Right.
just thought that they remembered the number, right? So you hear things and they become ingrained, and you have to be very, very aware of like the language that you use, and could it offend somebody? Is it offensive? Even though you might not mean it in that way, or you might not have ever heard it in that type of a context.
Mm-hmm.
We all hear things. We have to be very intentional to be aware of everything that comes out of our mouths, right?
Absolutely.
And just like the actions that we do. And you're right, media training, that's something that goes almost over the top now in traditional sports, where you have people backlash, like, who was it who was like, I'm just here so I don't get paid, and he said it, or so I don't get fined again and again and again.
Yeah. Beast mode.
Huh?
Beast mode from the Seattle Seahawks.
Is that Marshawn Lynch?
Yeah.
Thanks. So, like it's just such a weird little place that we're in, I think, right now.
Yeah.
It's like, definitely you want to be a part of this space, but you have to be very intentional about how you get into this space. And if you're going to trash talk, or you're going to be, really immersed in like that esports, there's a lot of swearing.
Right.
There's a lot of bad words. I'm a mom, so I listen to my son, and I'm listening to people. I'm like, who's that person? Like, I don't want you talking like that and like that.
Right.
So that's the balance, being very mindful about when you're passionate in the moment, like what's that language that you use, and really holding yourself accountable to, I think, exploring that, and then learning a new way to represent yourself. And as a pro athlete, does that mean it's too big of a risk? I don't think it's too big of a risk to get into esports. I think that there's huge benefits to being in the space, but you really need to understand the wider context of everything that you say. So I don't know. It probably took me way too long to get all that out, but I know that it's definitely something that a lot of people have been having conversations about as of late.
Yeah, I think people really need to take the time to learn, and be very purposeful in the space. Be very community first in the space. I have one last question for you before we wrap up here with you. And you have a lot of traditional sports experience. You live in the Minneapolis area. It's a big sports town. We've seen with Rocker V1, there's some esports presence up there as well. What is either something you've seen that's done well, traditional sports? Like, I'm not talking individual players, but I'm talking teams. Because traditional sports teams engaging with esports, or somebody who's doing it wrong, because I haven't seen a lot of people do it right. But I do have one thought on the best way for a traditional sports team who owns an esports team to benefit that esports team. Thought about it the other day.
Well, please share, because that's what I do. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on our hometown teams. I do feel as though, the Minnesota Timberwolves, when they had their 2K team that first year, that ended up being the world champion NBA 2K team.
Yeah.
And it really fell on deaf ears here. So organizationally, I wasn't involved there. I didn't work there anymore. There's a million things I would have wanted to be done differently around that entire activation, and that entire season, to really amplify and ingrain that into the mainstream mind.
Yeah.
Because basketball is an experience. And I think some of the things that I was hearing was, well, it's separate from, 2K. We're not using player likeness. We can't bring in our actual players to do things with a 2K team. Like, it's very separate, which I get, but
Yeah.
youth basketball is so big here. It's massive. Youth basketball in Minnesota, I think, actually statistically surpasses hockey, and we're in the state of hockey.
Wow.
So youth basketball was a very, very major missed opportunity for our hometown and NBA team when it anchors back to 2K, because 2K is such a safe game to play. It's so family friendly. I think there could have been a ton to be done, and it was pre-COVID. So there's really not a ton of excuses. I think it was just, now we've got this team, and let's just add it, like layer it on to what we're already doing, instead of like a real true deep strategy.
Yeah.
What I really love about the Vikings is the way that they approached getting into esports was to completely separate it. Now there's a ton of support, right?
Yes.
Like, if you need something, especially on our production side, I mean,
yeah,
the NFL studios and everything that we have within our Vikings Lakes area has definitely been advantageous for the team as a whole.
Right.
But for them to invest in a team and say, we are going to give this the budget, the talent, the facility, everything that we believe it deserves to be successful on its own, has been instrumental for the success, not only of the Call of Duty, the very first year with Minnesota Rocker, but during COVID, they have purchased 2 more esports teams. Yeah. And we're working on huge strategy to do some really groundbreaking things in regards, for us, groundbreaking in terms of really continuing to grow and amplify organizationally what that means. So I think it really has to be something that you put the appropriate, not only the dollars behind, but an appropriate strategy behind. And obviously I'm biased because I work for that property as a contractor, and I help on monetizing that group. But it's been like my greatest joy working with that team, and being able to work utilizing my marketing and brand mind, working with marketers to help them get into the space, I think has worked really well, because I'm not a salesman. I don't come from a sales background. So I'm literally talking to brands, solution-based, educating them, bringing them in thoughtful ways, versus just like, here's our assets, do you want to buy the thing? I think that's a big difference maker, but it's been a pretty great product to sell, I'd say. We have a great team.
Cool. I love that. I'll share my hot take and I'll let you react to it.
Getting a pen.
Okay.
Ready.
Write this. You're ridiculous. All right. So my hot take, it's not the sexiest, but I think it's the most effective.
Okay.
Is that if a traditional sports team owns an esports team, like the Dallas Cowboys own Complexity Gaming, for example, or, the Vikings own the Rocker V1, what I would do is take my top partnership activation person on the traditional team side and place them with the esports team. And that doesn't sound groundbreaking, but here's the thing it'll do. The biggest problem in esports right now is that sponsorship revenue is the number one source of revenue, but brands are not receiving an ROI on their sponsorships. And a big reason for this is because you have quite a few people running these teams who are young and simply don't have a lot of professional experience activating partnerships. When you take that person who has a decade of doing it with the biggest brands in the world, knows exactly how to do it, they come to the esports team and there's knowledge sharing happening both ways. That person is going to be able to learn about the esports and gaming community from the people who work for the team, from the endemic gamers who work for the team. And that person is going to be able to show them through example how to effectively manage a client relationship, how to maximize that sponsorship so the partner receives that ROI. And what's going to
You know
happen? Go ahead.
We just did that.
Boom.
Are you saying that because you know that we just did that?
No, I had no idea.
So we just hired Jenna Johnson, who actually was on my podcast. She was at Octagon for over 10 years. She's worked on the largest global brands for 10 years. She had a taste of esports with MasterCard's sponsorship of, I think, League of Legends.
Yeah.
And so now she is running all of our partnership activations. She's leading all of that. And you would not believe the amount of evolution that's happened in the last not even month, because she's bringing in process, protocol, thought leadership, documentation, planning that has literally not been done before. I mean, we're a startup.
Exactly.
That is brilliant. Thank you, John. We think the same. Because when I had a call with her and I had her on my podcast, I mean, she just added so much value because of that global brand experience and knowing how, especially how do you communicate ongoing day in, day out with those types of global brands and the agencies that represent those global brands to make sure that, we don't look like small potatoes,
exactly.
Right? We look like we do this day in and day out with the largest brands. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we're seeing it in less than a month, the change organizationally, because we have someone like that at the helm of activation on partnerships.
Yep.
And I think that's really, really key. She didn't come from a pro team. She came from a big agency.
But she's an expert in that.
Very similar. Yeah, that expertise is so necessary in this space. But you have to pay for expertise also. True. And as we know, in an emerging market, those budgets aren't necessarily what one would have at a big agency.
Exactly. And these brands are used to, you have to support a brand in the way they're used to being supported.
Yeah.
Especially these big brands. And when people come to our space, the spotlight's on us now, and we need to be prepared for it. And it can't be overstated how far the combination of taking the time to understand the gaming community and and also applying solid business practices can go. It doesn't, you have to remake the world. You just have to understand these two things and then build on that.
Right.
But we're coming up to the end of the hour with you. I could obviously talk to you all day. We have many hour-long conversations on the regular, so this is just one of many. Is there anything that you'd like to share, or would you? I know you don't want too many people to get a hold of you because you're super busy.
I'm so slammed.
But anything you'd like to share with the audience before I let you go?
Honestly, one place that I would love people to find me is on Clubhouse, as I'm starting to speak on a number of initiatives on Clubhouse. Cool. I'm doing an Esports 101 with the Esports Club every Monday night from 6 to 9 p.m. Central.
Nice.
Which is a really great talk. I'm also speaking with the gamers on Monday evenings as well. Some kind of a balance between the two, and really talking about women in gaming, women in esports, women collegiate esports. I also speak. The Esports 101 is Tuesdays. Mondays is the gamers, and I'm also talking about marketing and marketing tactics within esports. And then on Friday evenings, I talk with the team at NutriGamer, and we have a lot of conversations about health and wellness in esports. I think we're going to really see a major shift in the types of brands that are going to be represented and investing in esports, and the nutrition market as a whole is a really big mind-body shift within the gaming industry. Really offering up the brands that gamers are very passionate about already, and really creating better balance there. So Clubhouse is a place that I spend a lot of time, and I would love to connect with more people there.
Awesome. And I'll tune into this myself and look forward to continuing learning more from you. Rebecca Longawa, founder of Happy Warrior, thank you for joining me on this episode of the DLC Drop Podcast.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the DLC Drop Podcast. This podcast is part of the Esports Futuri Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave us a review.